Welcome to Grant's Rock Warehouse, and tonight I want to welcome everybody to the third episode in our ELO series. Tonight we are looking at On the Third Day at ELDORADO. Marco and the Parish are here. We want to hear from you in the chat. Be ready to give your rating. All right, here we go.
Grant is changing the world one track at a time on Grant's Rock Warehouse.
Holy crap, ladies and gentlemen. We are live, but we only have 4 people watching. I hope we get more people. Come on, everybody. We will. We know how this works. Now they're starting to come. Gentlemen, how are you? We got the Parish and Marco are both here.
Doing great.
Nice to see everybody. This is our third episode. Now, if you're keeping track of this, we did the first 2 albums, and then we kind of went a little on a tangent and ranked we did our favorite tracks, which is kind of, is that really, that would be the second episode. So this is our third episode, which is appropriate on the third day, and we are looking at ELDORADO, which is the 4th album. So, that being said, we are going to want to hear from you in the chat because we will ask you for a rating. I think that's always good. It's always nice to keep everybody, it's always nice to keep the conversation interactive. So, that being said, I'm going to assume Marco is ready. One of these gentlemen, I mean, I could do it. Marco, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, let's rock
Talk
and roll.
about On the Third Day, and then we'll just go around. We'll have a discussion, what we like, what we don't like. It's kind of like a Contrarian Star Court episode, kind of like that. But all right, cool. Marco, why don't you start us off?
Yeah, all right, let's do it. Let's talk about On the Third Day. So we had talked about the first couple albums. I had mentioned that I had read this book about Roy Wood. It talks about his time in ELO and after ELO and stuff like this. Here's a cool single 45 that I picked up.
Make it
Wizard.
bigger.
So we got Roy Wood. He's off doing Wizard at this point. And that leaves Jeff, who I also picked up this awesome book written by the same author. Leaves him basically in charge of ELO at this point. So once Roy's gone from the band after ELO 2, they ended up recruiting Michael D'Albuquerque, who they also nicknamed, what did they nickname him? Albert Turkey was his nickname, apparently, in the studio. And so Jeff, I think, finished up all the bass that Roy didn't play on the second album. They brought Michael D'Albuquerque in, and he started performing with them live around the time that ELO 2 came out. And if you look up Kuyama Live, that's Michael D'Albuquerque singing the second harmony live and playing bass in that clip. And that's from the second album. So Michael D'Albuquerque's in full swing when they record On the Third Day. At this point, from what I understand, reading this book, the Jeff Lynne book, Jeff at this point kind of was directing the band. So in the studio, he basically, ELO became his project and he became like the director. So he was pointing at the instruments, kind of directing them how to play. They started getting orchestral players in the studio. On the first couple of albums, they hired cello players who became part of the band, and they also would play themselves, Jeff and Roy. But at this point, they actually started hiring studio musicians. I think on ELDORADO, they had a complete orchestra, as well as a choir and stuff like this. So this is when they start kind of getting hired musicians, orchestral players around this time. And this is, like I said, you know, Jeff's kind of taking over the band, directing everybody in the studio. Even Bev at this point was kind of just being told what to do by Jeff and told how to play. Apparently, Jeff at this point, when he was writing songs, would come up with melodies instrumentally and phonetically sing out the lyrics. And then that way he'd make like sound effects and noises and stuff, and then kind of write words to those noises later. So that's the kind of the way that he was writing tracks at this time. And interestingly enough, at the same time, I have some notes here. Jeff produced the B-side of a single from Del Shannon right around this time called Distant Ghost. The side was Cheap Love, the A-side. And the B-side, Jeff Lynne produced, which is interesting. And there's a bit of, I don't know if you're aware of the Mark Bolan influence on this album. So Mark Bolan, so I have a couple of 45s of T-Rex. Solid Gold, easy action. Just to show some stuff off. I'm a big T-Rex fan as well. Apparently he popped in the studio on the third day and played, I think, uncredited on a couple of tracks and some tracks that were never released until much later. And apparently at this time, he even would jam with them on stage when they would do like Roll Over Beethoven.
Yeah, first time I came across ELO, I didn't see the concert, but they played at Watford Town Hall, which is where I lived in Watford. And Mark Bolan came on for the encore and did jammed, as you say, roll over it. And what a concert to have been at. I mean, never mind. I was only 7 at the time. I don't think my parents would have let me go, but there you go.
That would have been fantastic to see. Apparently, Mark and Jeff were good friends, even going back to the Tyrannosaurus Rex and Idle Race days. Apparently, they used to watch each other play live, and Idle Race used to cover Deborah by Tyrannosaurus Rex.
Wait till we do the ranking of the Idle Race albums. I'm not joking. Probably should look at that.
Wait until we do the T-Rex.
Oh, yeah, we're supposed to do T-Rex.
After Slade, I think we're going to do T-Rex.
Yeah, so Mark, I'm assuming you want to be involved with the T-Rex shows.
I love T-Rex. I'd love to talk about them.
Well, look, Parish, we've got it together.
Got to do it. Yeah,
That's the goal, though. After we get through Slade, though, Marco, we're gonna tackle.
I have a very interesting T-Rex Idle Race tidbit that I'll save for the either Idle Race show or the T-Rex show. I've got a neat little tidbit.
We were waiting for you. We're glad
Keith, my man.
There he is.
Did you want me to go through on the third day tracks and talk about the ones that I like?
I want you to go, and then we'll throw it over to Parish, and then we'll throw it over to me, and then we're going to throw it over to everybody in the chat and see how they rank this record. So I do want your ranking out of 10. This is just like a dark horse episode.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Marco.
Great album. Another interesting thing that I read was apparently Roy Wood slipped into the studio at this point and even kind of had listened to the music and had some conversation and some feedback for Jeff. So that's interesting to know that apparently that. Yeah, apparently he was still kind of part of it. Even up until 76, he played with ELO on the B-side of a Bev Bevan single that Bev Bevan put out in 76.
Oh,
Jeff produced it.
What was that? What was the track called? Do you remember?
I have it written down somewhere. But Bev Bevan, it was a single called "Let There Be Drums," produced by Jeff Lynne, and included ELO members, including the new member Kelly Grucut, who replaced Michael d'Albuquerque, who left after on the third day, and Richard Tandy. And the B side was "Heavy Head," which was co-written by ELO, produced by Jeff, and included Roy Wood on sax. So Roy Wood actually was jamming with ELO in 76 with Jeff and the guys, which is interesting that he was kind of still floating around for a few years. But back to On the Third Day. Yeah, great lineup of songs. This is one of my favorite ELO albums. Ocean Breakup, King of the Universe reminds me of, it's kind of the last of the songs that remind me of The Move, like Message from the Country and even the early ELO stuff like Overture 10538. Bluebird is Dead, great tune. Oh No, Not Susan. Oh No, Not Susan. Dreaming of 4000. Like those are underrated songs that I appreciate Jeff's lyrics in those songs because as like poppy as these songs can sound with the classical influence and stuff like this, when you really think about the lyrics, you kind of realize that they're kind of tragic in some ways, which is I think overlooked when you listen to the melodies and the music. Because they sound poppy, they sound rocky, but the lyrics are, Jeff Lynne was an excellent lyricist. Whatever strategy he used to write lyrics. But anyways, Oh No, Not Susan, Dreaming of 4000 are great underrated songs on the album. And then, of course, Showdown is probably my favorite song off the album. And I think was one of my top few songs when we did our top 10. I think it was in the top 5. If not, it should have been. The production, excellent. Sounds like it could have been released today. Sounds very contemporary. Love the song Showdown. One of my favorite ELO albums. What would I give it out of 10? I mean, subjectively, objectively, whatever. This is one of my favorites. It would be like a 9.5, if not maybe a 10 out of 10. Maybe I'll give it a 9.5. Give it a 9.5 out of 10. Definitely in terms of like ELO, it's probably better than the first 2 albums, but I really like those first 2 albums. They have a soft spot in my heart, but
yeah, totally.
I love, this is a great album. Great Jeff Lynne album.
But this is different than the UK version because the US album has Showdown on it.
Yeah, UK didn't have Showdown.
Didn't have Showdown on it.
Yeah, I'm talking about whatever version I can hear on like Spotify or whatever's available. You know what I mean? So they
No, the
usually
American
include.
ver- it
I
was on-
include Showdown in there.
It was on the American version when it came out. It just wasn't on the UK version initially. It is on the CDs and subsequent.
So they're probably
releases.
going with the US track listing now. I'm assuming it's like the Beatles, making Magical Mystery Tour an official album, on the UK albums. Same kind of thing. But anyway, all right, excellent, Marco, a 9.5. I do like this record quite a bit. Dang. All right, Parish, what's your thoughts on this record?
I mean, my first point is I think this is the first of what sounds like really ELO. I mean, the first two albums I think are good, really like them, but I think this is where ELO are starting to really get their sound. I mean, it's interesting what you said about Bevin doing what he was told on this album, because this is the first album I think sounds like Bevin. The feels that he does and everything sort of comes through. Now, maybe I'm just familiar with Bevin being told what to do with by Jeff Lynne.
So apparently Jeff, they would close my cassette, and apparently Jeff would almost vocalize to him how to play his fills on this album. Like he literally was directing him.
But that must have been what happened ever since, because this sounds like Bevin, whereas I don't think the first two albums particularly do. You've got Richard Tandy in there as well, and I think the keyboards are a lot more in your face than the first two albums. And then some standout tracks. Bluebird is Dead, I think, is brilliant. I think that's a really good track. And I particularly like the vocals, and I also like the drumming on it. New World Rising, Ocean Breakup, Reprise. I think that sounds like it could have come off New World Record. It's got that kind of sound to it, very much in that vein. You got Showdown, which is a fantastic song. Daybreaker I really like, and it's an instrumental. But what I think's interesting on it is if you listen to Mr. Blue Sky in the outro, when you can hear the cellos kicking and everything, Daybreaker is almost that for the whole song. It sounds like the outro on Mr. Blue Sky. And I think it's pretty cool for that. You got Mama Bell on it, which is the rock, probably the heaviest thing they've ever done.
Their most commercial from the album too, I think.
Yeah, it was a big hit. But the last two tracks are my favourite two tracks. I think Dreaming of 4000 is great. I love the way the guitar starts, the tempo changes in it, and again I think it's in that kind of New World Record classic ELO sound, and I think that sounds fantastic. And then in the Hall of the Mountain King, a cover version of a classical song. But if you watch the YouTube channels, and they do shows such as what would Saturday Night Fever sound like if it was played by Metallica, those kind of shows. Well, this is a bit like, what does a classical song sound like if played by a rock band? That's kind of thing, and I'm surprised they didn't do more of it, and I'm actually surprised more bands don't do it, because I think it's probably the standout track on the album. I just think it's fantastic, and I'm not particularly a classical music fan. I just think they do such a really good version of it, and they just rock it up, and it's very hard not to think of it as an ELO track, really. So I think it's a really good album. The last two tracks are my favourites. I still think there's better to come, and because I think there's better to come, I'll give it an 8 out of 10. But that's more to do with what's to follow rather than anything else.
All right, 8 out of 10. I can't argue with that. I agree with Parish 100% on this, but I've got to have the US album. I've got to have Showdown, because it does make it a better record. And what a way to end side one with Showdown. Come on, it's great. Bluebird is Dead. I really love side two, because it starts out with Daybreaker and Ma Bell, which I think is fabulous. And in the Hall of the Mountain King, the Who did a version of that. It was an outtake on Who Sellout. I don't know if Jeff ever heard that back in the day or not, but I absolutely think it's great, their version of it. They rock it up. I love this record because it does seem to be like a transitional record. And this, I also agree that this is where ELO has arrived. Now, I'm not bad mouthing Roy Wood. I've loved Roy. But in modern, when you listen to modern ELO, Showdown, come on, that's a modern ELO track. This is where they got it together. And as far as Jeff running the show, you can't tell me that Roy Wood wasn't running the show before. Just saying. So with Roy out of the way, Jeff can, fine tune everything. What I would give this record, God, what would I give it? I love this. There are there are albums in the catalog I like more, but man, there's just something about this record that I like. And I think I'm gonna give it an 8 out of 10. I dig it. And I like it more and more the more I listen to it. Now, back in the day when, as a kid, this is one of the albums I really didn't pick up. It wasn't all that popular. Everybody was listening to, New World Record or Out of the Blue. And it took me a long time to really get into this, but now I dig it. Now, at this point, okay, Gary's hip to the scene, baby. So we got a 7.5 from Gary. What would everybody who knows this record, what would you rate this out of 10? This is your time to shine before we go to Eldorado. Nathan gives it an 8. Why do I think that this record's going to fare really well? I have a feeling. Ash is coming in with a 5. Well, that's going to bring our numbers down. But I want you to be honest. We're trying to turn people on or not turn people on. And it's really just about people watching this video go, well, if I'm on the fence about this record, do I want to get it or do I not? So, Ash, we got a 5. DC's coming in at an 8.5. Keith's coming in at an 8. See, I think 8's a good. I think that's a good number.
I think
8.
Ash has based his scoring purely on that album cover.
I
think that's an appalling album cover.
I think that this is better than the other album cover.
I think it's an appalling. I mean, what made Bevan think he looked cool dressed like that?
Because Bevan's cool.
Well, he is cool. If anybody was going to get away with it, but I don't know what made him think he was going to look cool in that.
It looks like a single cover.
It's.
I like it because I don't think. Okay, Logan's coming at the 6.5. Well, I think it's still better than just Jeff's head bouncing out there in the middle of the space.
But they came up with some brilliant album covers later. But this is almost like shit. We've got an album coming out next week. Better take a quick photo.
DC says this is a better album cover than the UK cover. All right, well, let's tally. I guess that's all we're going to get.
Yeah,
all right.
The UK one wasn't any better, to be fair.
I like this one better. It doesn't make me want to go throw up. All right, here we go. Oh, I didn't. Yeah, I got my ranking. We came up with a 7.7 out of 10.
Wow.
I thought I think it's a good. Well, I mean, you could round it up to 8. Patriot says the album covers didn't get good until Out of the Blue. I don't know about that. I think after. Maybe Out of the Blue they threw in the kitchen sink as far as marketing with the mobile and they spent a lot of money on that record.
The thing I like about On the Third Day too, I didn't mention, but you kind of mentioned when you said Showdown ends side 2. Well, It makes sense that Showdown's only on the American version because I think initially on the Third Day, the first side of the album was a concept album. And the second side was like standalone songs. And the first side, the concept had something to do with like biblical themes or something. But Showdown doesn't quite fit in with that concept. So it makes sense that On the Third Day, the first side ended before Showdown. To me.
That's true. We should mention that this is the first record where they actually had, in reality, all of side 1 was supposed to be a concept. And of course, we added Showdown, but Showdown's still a great track.
It's also worth mentioning, actually, that this album was a hit in America, but did nothing in the UK.
It didn't chart in the UK.
No.
Yeah, and actually, Jeff was getting publicly frustrated with that because he was saying in like magazine interviews and stuff like, why should we tour in Britain when we play one night, we might sell out, the next night nobody shows up, when we can go to the States and make a fortune. So he was publicly starting to talk about the States that way. And eventually they exclusively recorded in the States.
Well, then they put all their energy here. They figured they were not going to take off in the UK, so let's concentrate on the USA. And it took a while for ELO really to take off in the UK. All right, cool. Well, I put in Space Rex entry, and now we have what do we have? We have a 7.68. Really didn't change it, but well, it kind of changed it. No, you're not helping Space Rack. Anyway, so there you go. I think I gave it an 8. I think it's a great record. It's just a transitional record. All right, on to the next album. We are going to take a look at Eldorado that came out in 1974. And like Marco had mentioned, this was the first one that included a full orchestra. And I do believe, wasn't it Lewis Clark did all the arrangements on here? And
I don't know if he did. There was. I know Jeff was getting frustrated with working with some of the union members and musicians on this album because they brought in that orchestra. Can't remember if it was Lewis Clark. I think I have it written down somewhere though.
Lewis Clark co-arranged it with Jeff Lynne and Richard Tandy.
But this did pretty good. This reached 52 on the U.S. charts. I think. We're looking at the wrong thing. I'm not sure where this ranked. I think
got to number
on
16.
the third day got up to 52.
This got to 16 on the US charts.
16, so that's really good. I mean, this has been mentioned on various prog rock lists. Classic Rock's 50s albums that built prog and Rolling Stone's 50 greatest prog albums. It was at number 43. So this is widely considered. If you ever go over to Steve Hoffman's site, Steve Hoffman always raves about this. A lot of the ELO fans really like this record. I love this record. I think it's one of their best records. Anyway, I'm going to throw it over to Marco, let him talk about it. Marco, what are your thoughts on this one? And we will do the same thing with everybody in the chat. We will get your rankings here shortly.
Yeah, great record. I really like this period of ELO. You're right. It was more commercially successful in the States. It was gold. It was top 20, like you said. And it really didn't do much in Britain other than it got good reviews. Got some good critical reviews. Roy Wood said very positive things about it publicly. Said it was the finest thing he'd heard since Sgt. Pepper. This is when Jeff, I guess, brought in that orchestra and the choir, and he had a lot of issues with the union and the musicians. And apparently there was some tense recording sessions where I think the cello players and the string instrument players actually ended up walking out at one point, and Jeff had to call in like the head of the union and like negotiate them to come back to work on this album. So I think that was the nail in the coffin. And after that, I think he exclusively recorded in the States. Not 100% sure on that, but I think I read that in the book. Michael D'Albuquerque, the bass player who had joined 4 after ELO 2 and 4 on the third day, ended up leaving the band right around when they started recording. I think he's marginally in some of the recording, but Jeff actually does most of the bass on the tracks. Kelly Grucut doesn't come in until after this album's recorded, I believe, when they started playing live. So Jeff is mostly doing the bass. This is where they have like the orchestration. This is, like you said, did you mention the Classic Rock magazine called it one of the top 50 influential prog albums?
I did not.
Of all time? Yeah, so this is highly regarded. The album cover, funny story, we were just talking about album covers. Apparently Sharon Osbourne was the one who picked this image, and Jeff and Bev apparently were not happy with the album cover when they saw it. They almost like fell out of their chair apparently.
But that's her hands, isn't it? I mean, that's Sharon's hands in the picture, obviously. So,
you know, Lauder has a good point. He said the strings actually sound proper now. Well, they are. Before that, the cello sounded like bellowing crows. Well, this has got a full orchestra on it. So this is like fully realized Electric Light Orchestra as far as I'm concerned. They were never I don't believe they were ever as majestic on this record as they were more majestic on this record than they were coming up, you know. I think Jeff's still trying to develop things.
There were definitely times on the earlier albums where the cellos sound like they're still tuning up, in my view. And I say that as a cello player. But
That's
there's,
probably I could see Roy sitting there in the seat tuning his cello right before
yeah,
the take,
there's certainly a bit of that.
or
But
during
you
the
don't-
take.
and you don't get any of that on this one. This is a different
He
sound.
says Sharon's hands. Well, maybe it could be. I don't know.
So
Well,
yeah,
anyway,
they had
go
a 40
ahead,
piece.
Go ahead, Marco.
Yeah, they had a 40-piece orchestra. Apparently, you could hear. I think on the CD release or mix of some versions, you can actually hear at one point the cello players or the string players or the leader slammed his case down or something on the ground in some argument, and you could hear it on the recording in one of the CD mixes. Apparently, I can't remember if that's in Mr. Kingdom. Anyway, yeah, this is another fantastic album, and it's up there for me with On the Third Day. I prefer On the Third Day just slightly to this one, but if you look at the song, like there's a lot of incredible songs on here. Eldorado is like an epic finale to the album. And it starts off almost like epically, like it's really reaching, I think. Can't Get It Out of My Head is a great tune. Apparently that was written based on a criticism from Jeff's Pop that he didn't think any of their songs were very catchy. So he wrote Can't Get It Out of My Head as a response to that. Boy Blue, classic. Laredo Tornado, this kind of is like a sister song to Showdown for me, and one like my favorite track probably off the album. And there's a great live version of it. When you hear it live, it almost sounds like a different song, and it's great. And that's with Kelly Grucut would be on that live version. You can find it on YouTube. Poor Boy, Mr. Kingdom kind of reminds me of the Beatles in some ways. Nobody's Child, Illusions in G major is kind of like that. 50s rock and roll, kind of like California Man. It's like the Yellows version of California Man, Illusions in G major. And yeah, I think it's a great album. I just slightly like On the Third Day a little bit better. So for me, it's like a 9 out of 10.
9 out of 10.
yeah.
All right. Well, that's still good, Marco.
That's really high.
Sakes.
Right.
That's still really high. I'm
Yeah.
not too worried. But I do have a point. Jeff Kendall said this album really flows from beginning to end, and I 100% agree. This just seems like a complete work. Everything is sequenced very well. The songs flow really well. I love the production here. I do think this is, they've remastered this like on gold CD and audiophile CDs. This album just sounds wonderful. It depends upon what you like in ELO, but this just seems so fully realized to me. Anyway, all right, let's throw it over to the Parish and get his thoughts on it. Parish?
Well, the first thing I'd say is we should give it its full title, which is Eldorado, a symphony by the Electric Light Orchestra. That's the official title. And the subtitle to it, a symphony by the Electric Light Orchestra, is very important because this is a concept album. And as you said earlier, Marco was prompted partly by his dad, who was a big classical music fan, and he wanted to come out with an album that impressed him. So it's a concept. It's a concept of a sort of a Walter Mitty type character who through his dreams visits various fantasy lands, and the themes for each of the songs tie into that. So, and I think that's why it flows and it does. And I think that's one of the reasons why it's up there for prog rock fans, because it's kind of got that concept. As an album, I think it starts well with the Eldorado Overture. As you said earlier, it's very epic. Can't Get It Out of My Head is one of their best songs. Just a classic. And I think that was the reason it did so well in the States, because that was a hit, wasn't it, in America? It wasn't a hit in the UK, but was a hit in America, and that probably drove the album through. Boy Blue is another song I like a lot. It's got that trumpet fanfare at the beginning, and then goes into a very catchy pop song, which I'm surprised. Maybe it was released as a single, I don't know, but certainly wasn't a hit. Poor Boy, what's it? Poor Boy, the Greenwood in brackets, has kind of got, I think, Dylan-esque vocals on it in parts, but it seems to fit it. And then again, the second side, I think it just gets stronger. Mr. Kingdom, You're right about the Beatles bit, because I think it sounds like Across the Universe to me, and it sounds very. And the problem is, once you hear that, you can't get it out of your head.
Yep.
That was a pun.
We need more. I need sound effects.
But a good song nonetheless. And then it's interesting, Illusions in G major, which you would imagine by the actual song title is going to be this great big classical music fanfare towards the end. Turns out to be their rock and roll boogie song. You're right, it's kind of California Man. I wrote down it's kind of Roll Over Beethoven Part 2. It's like they've written their own sort of version of it.
Yeah.
But the best track I think on the album is Eldorado Finale. I think that is just absolutely epic. It's haunting, and it is. In fact, I can't believe I didn't put it in my top 10 actually when I look back, because I think it's such a good song. So where would I put it? I think this is the first of their classic albums. They now have a run of several. We'll find out how many, I suppose, in my view, as we go through. But 4 or 5 classic albums. This is the first one. It's still not my favourite, but I'd give this a 9 out of 10. And despite what we've said about album covers, I like that album cover. I've always liked that album cover. I just think it's very distinctive and fits the theme very well. So I don't normally say this, but well done, Sharon Osbourne.
To create something like this is off the charts brilliant. DC, I'm assuming you're going to go with a 10 on this? Patriot, he's going to give a 9.5. All right, let me record that real quick. All right. This, ladies and gentlemen, you may be surprised, but this is my favorite ELO album. I think as an artistic statement, this has everything. The perfect orchestration. It's got a beginning. It's got an end. The sequencing is great. The production's great. I love the artwork on the cover. It checks every box that I have. I think that when I look at the tracks, Boy Blue is phenomenal. Can't get out of my head. The way side 1 begins is just absolutely perfect. Eldorado Overture, strong, beautiful opening, and then it goes right into Can't Get Out of My Head, which is saccharine good, just pop goodness. I can listen to that over and over again. And just from there, it just gets better. Poor Boy Blue, the Greenwood, fabulous. Everything that the Parish said, 100%. Now, there are other albums, like DC said. There are other great. This is my favorite. This is a 10 out of 10 record. This should be everyone's go-to, I think, because Jeff got this perfected. I think because when you get to a certain point, they were getting more popular, and you had to crank out more hits. This just seems like the perfect artistic statement to me for ELO. That's all.
Yeah.
Before, they're cranking out, well, we got to have hits. And this just seems like a more cohesive just record that can stand on its own. So
the funny thing about that, Grant, is that at the time, I think Jeff was really dedicated to making ELO an album band and not a singles band. So it's just fascinating how many.
And he's doing great so far.
Solo songs they had.
All right. So I got Patriot Tex. I've got his. DC's going with a 10. Yeah, I'm with you, DC. You're all generous. Maybe. What do you want to? Well, Brian, give us your score. Webb's going with an 8.5, but we already know Webb doesn't really know much. Just joking, Webb. Al's going to go with a 9. Okay. The good doctor's here. He's going with a 10, baby. All right, doesn't mess around. Jeff Kendall's giving it a 9. DC is generous. Space Wreck is 9. I think this record's going to look pretty good, gentlemen. Oh, that's true. Webb likes Webb will be on next month because he likes these other albums. So we'll bring Webb in. We'll get his point on it. Ken White, 9.25. Ken, look at you shine. All right. Nathan's going with the 10. All right, Nathan, I got you. That's fine.
I'm betting on an 8.5 here.
Ash is going with an 8. 8. The Ash seems a little low for me.
It's going to
Louder
be
than life.
8.7. 8.7.
Jay's going to go with the 9.5. We're going to put that down. I'll go with that. Keith, 8. Everybody's coming in on this one, hot and heavy. The Lizard King channel going with a 9. All right. Anybody else? We're going to do a tally. Anybody else hasn't weighed in on it? I need like, I wonder if I can play like music. It's got to be mind blowing. It's got to be mind blowing to be, it's mind blowing to me. On the remaster, see, there's an Eldorado instrumental melody. Yes. I used to have the remaster, but I just have do I have the gold CD? I think I've got the gold DCC CD, which sounds phenomenal. All right, I guess everybody's in. All right, let's calculate. We've got a 9.17, 9.2. I'm good with that. My mind was blown. 11. Well, I could put 11 down, but you are a doctor. Maybe I should listen to you. Anyway, there you go. 9.17. Pretty awesome.
It's a great run of albums.
Great run of albums.
In this on the third day on. I think I gave the first one like an 8 and the second one 7.5.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think they're getting better as far as I'm concerned. We all have our favorites, but I just think as an artistic work, I think this just stands up. To me, it just is quintessential ELO, you know?
Yeah, and they could pull it off live too. They did really great live. They opened for Deep Purple in support of this.
Dawson's giving it a 4. They're bringing me down a little bit in my numbers, but the real albums. No, this is the real. Where can I ban Ash?
Let's be honest, Grant. We don't want anybody to bring you down, do we?
No. Doc agreed. When you think about the writing and orchestrating of an album like this, masterful, 100%. But that's all right. It's good. You know, the main point that we're here is to talk about ELO, to turn people onto stuff, and just to keep a music discussion alive. That's all we're doing. That's what the Warehouse is about, ladies and gentlemen. Who invited this guy? All right, so we've got. All right, I'll recalculate. Oh, that brought me down quite a bit. Now we're down to an 8.9. Oh well, that's still good. I guess, God, we whipped through this. Does the panel have anything more to add? Parish, you got anything? Anything you want to bring up before we?
Well, I mean, you were saying earlier about maybe it wasn't that commercial, but you've got to think about what other albums were coming out in '74, and I would say that maybe at the time, I mean, the orchestration was maybe different, but the idea of a concept album and bands focusing on albums as opposed to singles. I mean, there was a lot of acts out there doing that, and I would think it sits quite well with other albums of '74. I wouldn't say it's particularly different in that context. Yeah,
Marco, anything else you want to bring up? Anything you want to add before we?
No, just in terms of the story, of the story of like what was happening too. I think around this time, Don Arden, who is, I think, managing them, and orchestrated, it's a pun, but orchestrated them getting removed from the Warner Brothers label so that he could pick them up on the Jet label, which I think at the same time had, I think, wasn't Mark Bolan and T-Rex on Jet at one point, or I'm not really sure, but anyway, so he orchestrated that to get them on that label. Apparently, I think Shannon Osborne hated ELO at the time. She was not impressed with them, apparently, but I think they sounded like they were at odds. And yeah, they toured in support of this album. It did a lot better in the States than it did in Britain and things like that. But they were opening for Deep Purple at one point. At one point, Michael Nesmith opened for ELO on this tour, which is interesting little factoid. But yeah, they could do it live. They sounded great live, apparently. So and from what I've seen footage. There's footage online from songs that they performed around this time. They do Laredo Tornado live. They do Showdown live. So you can find live footage, which is always great. But no, one of my favorite bands and a great string of lineup of albums that they put out in a few years. So I'm looking forward to the next episode.
Yeah. I did look up T-Rex. They were never on Jet. They were on a lot of labels. Regal,
They're on Fly, I think,
Zonophone,
right?
Fly. They were on
Fly.
Fly.
Yeah, T-Rex and Roy Wood, I think, at the Move, I think were the two first artists on Fly. I think that's what I was mixing up with Jet.
They were on EMI. They were on Polydor. In the U.S., they were on Reprise, Blue Thumb, and Casablanca. So there you go. A lot of different labels. But we're going to look at T-Rex after we get done with Slade. Anyway, let's see. I guess we can wrap this dog up. We will be back next month, and we will be looking at see what's next. What's the 2 albums next? Brain problem.
Face the Music and New World Record.
New World Record. All right, and Webb will be on those, so we'll have
Time
another
to
person.
Face the Music. There's my pun for the day.
There you go.
There's a lot of puns tonight. Anyway, I want to thank all the people in the Peanut Gallery for coming in and voting and having a good discussion with everybody. I want to thank the Parish and Marco as well. Tomorrow night, I will want to say that there's going to be no live Contrarian chat, but we will be live on the Contrarians at 7 p.m. So don't change your dial. So tomorrow night we are going to do what do we call that? An album battle?
Battle Royal.
Battle Royale. We're going to do an album battle tomorrow. We're going to look at Dokken, Tooth and Nail against Rat, Out of the Cellar. I think that's the one.
That's right.
And we will be live. I do want everybody back here tomorrow. We're going to do the same kind of thing where we're going to go and poll everybody in the Peanut Gallery as well. So we're going to have an album battle tomorrow, and we'll see how that goes. And we just had one tonight. Parish, we just had one tonight.
We did, yeah.
Well, we didn't do it live. We just looked at Guns N' Roses Appetite versus AC/DC Back in Black. But this really lends itself to a live show, so we can include everybody, I think. So anyway, tune in tomorrow at 7 p.m. Eastern Time over on the Contrarians, where we will be having an album battle. Ooh, everybody. I know. 2 great albums. I'm not sure how I would I don't know what I'm going to say yet. That's a battle. It is a battle. Anyway, going to let everybody go. Have a good night. We will see you tomorrow night. And Parish, Marco, thanks for doing this. We'll see you next month, and I'll send some dates out tomorrow. We'll get this on the get this going. All right, boys. We'll see you. See you, everybody.
All right.
Bye.